of Bermuda, legislative body comprising of members of the Senate, the upper house, and members of the House of Assembly, the lower house, are scheduled to convene the upcoming legislative year. At this ceremony, you will have a chance to witness the history, tradition that are formally interwoven into the Constitution of our island. Now, we know it's a little early because the newly elected government has chosen to start in September. We're normally here in November when it's a little cooler. But today is a great day, and we're starting in September. Heather?
Today is a great day, and perhaps it bodes well because it means that the government wants to get on with the affairs of the people.
Yep.
Today marks the first legislative year under the leadership of the new government, led by Progressive Labor Party and Bermuda's youngest premier, the Honorable E. David Burt, JP, MP. It is also the first convening of Parliament under Governor Rankin.
Yep.
To all my fellow Bermudians gathered today for this most formal event on our legislative calendar, I am sure that today's ceremony will enhance your understanding of parliamentary history and traditions. It was after the American colonies achieved their independence that Bermuda was able to claim the distinction of being the oldest parliament in the Commonwealth. Bermuda has 396 years of parliamentary practice based on the Westminster system. Sir Edmund Sands, after whom Sands Parish is named, is responsible for extending the Westminster parliamentary institutions to colonies so that the colonists would have a constructive and organized say in their own affairs.
That's right. And the Bermuda Company, formed in 1615, instructed by Governor Nathaniel Butler to convene a general assembly that included representatives from then called the tribes, now referred to as parishes, to discuss local issues. On August 1st, 1620, the colony's first parliament convened in St. Peter's Church in St. George's. And there will be a test following the convening for all of you who do not know that fact. During the General Assembly, the first General Assembly, 5 acts were discussed and agreed on, and then prepared to be sent to England for the approval of the company. These first acts were ensure the manning of the King's Castle, prohibit the killing of young turtles, repatriate those who were sick, old, unable to cope, being carelessly sent out in the first place, levy 1,000 pounds of tobacco for public works, and prolong the authority of the governors until their successor had arrived.
You know, that makes sense, that the governor should stay so that there's a seamless transition.
Exactly.
So will that be on the test as well, Tina?
Yeah, that'll be on the test.
Okay.
What were the 5 issues discussed? 5 acts, the first 5 acts.
That's right. For our viewing and listening audience and guests, you will be aware that today's ceremony will have most of the traditions we have come to expect at this annual event. However, there are several changes to the program today. The colors, the Royal Bermuda Regiment Band and their Guard of Honor, will not be on parade this year. The Royal Bermuda Regiment is performing in Colorado as part of their annual camp.
Yeah.
The members of the Senate are meeting in the Cabinet building right now, Tina. So previously, when renovations began on the Cabinet building, the Senate meetings were relocated to the Decuto Atrium, named after the former Speaker of the House, Mr. Ernest Decuto. Right. That atrium is located in the Sessions House. Today, the Senate members will meet in the Cabinet building and will soon emerge to hear the speech from the throne. Today, we will also have newly elected Senate President and Vice President and newly elected Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the House of Assembly.
Yes. It will be the first time that we know, of course, Miss Kristen Burt has arrived, the Premier's wife, has arrived, Ms. Kristen Burt. Welcome.
Yes, hence the applause for those of you who heard the applause.
Right now we have the arrivals of the justices, the Puny Justice, and the Chief Justice, led by Chief Justice Ian Cayley, the Honorable Mrs. Justice Charlesetta Simmons, the Honorable Justice Stephen Hellerman, the Honorable Justice Nicole Stoneham, and the Honorable Miss Justice Carlisle Greaves.
Members of Parliament currently are assembled in the House chambers. If all is well,
Yes,
and if there are no constitutional crises,
yes. No fights.
no fights breaking out,
No fights breaking out.
no fights breaking out, our elected members of the House of Assembly should now be gathering in the impressive Sessions House on the Hill just behind us.
Right.
Okay.
Now, we will find out who is the newly elected Senate President and Vice President.
That's right.
Because we don't know, but whoever emerges on the steps for when the governor arrives, that's when we'll know.
That's when we'll know.
Who is the new Senate leader. President, I should say, and who is the Vice President of the Senate.
And do we know who the Speaker of the House is?
We don't, well, we know who's elected, but of course the appointment will take place today, right here, right before the reading of the throne speech from the throne.
Yes.
Our House of Assembly, as I've told you, is actually the lower house of our legislature. Appointed members of the Senate are in the upper house. His Excellency, the Governor, John Rankin, his first convening of Parliament, John Rankin, CMG, will read the speech from the throne. The speech from the throne is prepared by government, and it outlines their initiatives for the coming year. Upon arrival of His Excellency, the Governor will be given a salute by the acting commanding officer of the Royal Bermuda Regiment, Warren Furbett, and Regimental Sergeant Major, Warrant Officer Class 1, Alvin Harvey. At the same time, the standard, or the flag, is broken, which signifies that the Governor is on parade. This process is called breaking of His Excellency's standard, which signifies that he is now on parade. So we will have very shortly, we will see right now we have joining us, I believe, are the head of the Civil Service, led by Dr. Derek Binns, who is the Cabinet Secretary.
And he is followed by the Deputy Head of the Civil Service, Mrs. Sherry Witter, and followed then by Mr. Mark Telemack, Mrs. Valerie Robinson James, Mr. Randolph Rochester. Following Mr. Rochester is Ms. Razia Zaw, Ms. Marva O'Brien,
I think we missed one. Jennifer Attride Sterling.
Jennifer Attride Sterling, Mr. Wayne Carey, and Mr. Richardson. Welcome to our senior management, our senior civil service executive.
The permanent secretaries.
The
yes.
permanent secretaries and the head of the civil service.
When the governor arrives, as I said, we will have a salute. We'll have the playing of the national anthem, and then His Excellency will dispatch Black Rod to go and call the members of the House to come forthwith and to be a part of the reading from the speech from the throne. Mm-hmm. We are missing, of course, the regiment band this year, but because of the timing with the summer camp that they do,
yes.
and then the performances that the band is doing, we are missing them. You can tell them that next time you see them, but of course, with the speech from the throne being moved up to September, we don't have them here. But we are delighted to see today former premiers, Sir John Swan. I think I saw it. Yes, I did.
Yes.
I believe I saw it. Well, I know I saw it.
Premier Alex Scott,
Yes,
former Premier
Premier
Alex Scott.
Alex Scott, and Lady Scott.
And Lady
I call
Scott.
her Lady Scott.
Absolutely, she is. And Tina, I also saw the U.S. Consul General arrive.
Right. And then she slipped in, because normally she comes in
And
really
gives
fancy and gives me a little wave. But I saw Dame Jennifer Smith, former premier.
Oh,
as well.
Dame Jennifer, she did slip in.
She did slip in. I also saw the mayor of St. George's, I do believe, Cornell Francis, worshipful Cornell Francis. And I saw many members of the honorary council as well. Thank you for being here. Now, I must say, I always get in trouble, but I have to do this. This occasion of the reconvening of Parliament brings out the best hats, the best fascinators, better than any tea that you could go to. And I want to thank all the ladies who did don a hat today.
Absolutely.
Or a fascinator. You look fabulous. I love it.
They do.
I love
they
it.
do.
And I always recall, and I tell this story over and over again, my mother used to look forward to just this day. She would go and find the right hat. She didn't necessarily do the gloves,
Right,
but she
right.
would find the right hat, the right dress, and she would make sure she smartly walked down that steps of the House of Assembly to show off her latest outfit.
There
I'm
you go.
sometimes.
Absolutely. And you know, she always looked so smart and so proud.
Absolutely.
And so did the ladies today with their beautiful hats. The Premier's wife has on a lovely hat.
Yes.
I saw that. Yes. And several other of our ladies who've joined us.
Coming. The senators are now arriving. I can't see. Senator
Michelle Simmons in a beautiful.
Senator James Jardine. This is Senator Michelle P.G. Simmons. This is her first, having just recently appointed. Senator James Jardine is what we call a veteran of the
Yes, he's
Senate.
a veteran.
Yeah. Followed by additional senators.
That looks like Senator, the Honorable Kathy Lightbourne Simmons, JP, government leader in the Senate, and Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs.
Senator H. Anthony Richardson, JP. Senator Jason P. Hayward, JP, Junior Minister for Workforce Development, Social Development and Sports, and National Security.
And he is followed by Senator Crystal C. Caesar, Junior Minister for Home Affairs, Economic Development, and Tourism.
And she is followed by Senator Vance M.E. Campbell, JP, Junior Minister for Finance, Public Works, and Government Reform. Joining us now is Senator Nandy S.O. Otterbridge, JP, Opposition Leader in the Senate.
And she is followed by Senator Andrew W.R. Simons, JP.
Thank you.
He is followed by Senator T. Nicholas Kemp, JP. Opposition Senator Nicholas Kemp.
No. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been handed this right before the governor arrives. We'll ask you to stand when the governor arrives and remain standing through the playing of the national anthem and while he dispatches Black Rod. Now, I've been made to understand, late breaking news, Senator Joan E. Dillis Wright, MBE JP, is the new president of the Senate. And Senator James S. Jardine is the Vice President of the Senate.
Well done.
Well done.
Excellent.
So they have been elected by their peers, and then they will be confirmed right here right before the reading of the speech from the throne. And thank you to the clerk to the Senate, Mr. Clark Sumner, for providing that information. So that's wonderful, that because both Mr. Jardine, Senator Jardine, and Senator Joe Dillis-Wright have served several years within the Senate. I wish I knew how long, but it's been several years. So they're seasoned.
They are seasoned. They bring a wealth of experience and knowledge and will guide the proceedings of the Senate judiciously.
Absolutely. And of course, we have a senator who is also the Attorney General, the Minister of Legal Affairs, and that is the Honorable Kathy L. Lightbourne Simmons. And that is a wonderful position as well for her to be able to do. Serve on the cabinet. And at this very moment, at the southeastern entrance to the Sessions House, will be southern entrance. We're asking for you to stand as the governor will be arriving. His Excellency, the Governor John Rankin, CMG. He will be met by the new President of the Senate, Senator Joan E. Dillis-Wright, MBE, JP, President of the Senate. Yes, please stand.
Yes, please stand.
Please remain standing for the breaking of the standard, the national anthem, and until he dispatches Black Rod.
It is a glorious day for all the pomp and ceremony, and with His Excellency descending from his carriage, his horse-drawn carriage.
Now, simultaneously, and we'll tell you about this just a few moments. His Excellency, the Governor, has just dispatched Black Rod to summon the House, members of the House of Assembly. You may now be seated. And he said to the Black Rod, who is a senior police officer, is always fulfilled by the role of a senior police officer. He said to him, "Gentleman usher of the Black Rod, I command you to inform the Speaker of the House of Assembly that I request the presence of his honorable House forthwith."
There you go.
In other words,
get down here now.
And of course, the acting chief inspector this year is Acting Chief Inspector Mark Clark, who has the honor of serving as Black Rod. Just as another aside, so that you know, while the governor was arriving at the southeastern entrance to the Sessions House, two members of the House of Assembly, one from the governing party and one from the opposition, are delivering a message to a member of the governor's staff, Tanya Davis, to inform His Excellency that the House has now assembled in the chambers on the Hill, and members of Parliament will return to the House with a message from His Excellency. So it's an exchange of messages. Then, of course, Black Rod goes up, and you can go ahead and share with them.
Certainly. In accordance with British tradition, Black Rod represents the symbol of authority of the head of state. The House of Lords, officially known as Black Rod, is sent to summon the House of Commons. Now, this is a bit of history. The doors of the Commons chamber were shut in Black Rod's face. Why? This is a practice dating back to the Civil War, symbolizing the Commons' independence from the monarchy. Black Rod strikes the door 3 times before it is opened. Members of the House of Commons then follow Black Rod and the Commons Speaker to the Lord's chamber, standing at the opposite end to the throne, known as the bar of the House, to listen to the speech. So Black Rod will be banging on the door?
Yes, he will bang on the door.
Letting the members of the House of Assembly?
They will allow him
They will allow him to come in.
And then, of course, they will assemble to proceed down to hear the speech from the throne.
That's right.
His Excellency, the Governor, is, of course, as we said, this is his first one today, and he is accompanied today by his acting aide-de-camp.
His acting aide-de-camp is Duncan
Simons.
Simons.
Yes, I wanted to get his
I wanted to get his full title too.
Acting aide-de-camp, Duncan Simons, and he is, I believe, captain, adjutant of the Royal Bermuda Regiment.
Yes.
And he is normally serves in the capacity of acting of adjutant, but today he is in the capacity of acting aide-de-camp.
Interestingly, you know, Tina, his brother, Andrew Simons, is a senator,
Is a
newly
senator.
appointed senator.
Newly
So
appointed
I'm sure their parents are feeling very proud.
And absolutely, and his father, of course, a former cabinet minister.
That's right.
In the United Bermuda Party.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Today is the first, of course, reconvening of Parliament for the newly elected members and parliamentarians and senators. We have some newly elected MPs. Of course, today, the Honorable Wayne Keynes, who is the Minister for National Security. Tanae Furbin as well. Renee Ming, who is a former senator, is now a member of Parliament. Scott Simmons is now a member of Parliament. Dennis Lister III, he is the Lister family.
The Lister family.
Well represented.
Yes, and I'm sure his father, who's still an MP,
Yes.
is most excited to be sharing in the political discourse and both serving as members of the House at the same time.
Absolutely.
That is exciting.
As well as
Christopher Famous is the newly elected
Christopher
MP.
Famous, absolutely. And then one former cabinet minister, former senator, Jeff Barron,
Yes.
is elected, and Ben Smith as well.
Yes.
I believe I have all the newly elected MPs that are part of today's
Ceremony and
proceedings,
proceedings, yes.
As we said, His Excellency will confirm the elections of the Senate President and the Speaker of the House of Assembly. And he will say, I'm honored to inform, the President-elect will say, honorable members of the Senate, have you elected your President? The President-elect will step forward and say, Your Excellency, I am honored to inform Your Excellency that I have been elected to the position, and I now submit myself with all humility to your I cannot say the word for some reason. Stop going over the word.
Oh,
Your Excellency.
to Your Excellency.
It's the heat.
We'll blame it on the heat.
Yes, while everyone's sitting under the lovely tent.
Tent.
We're out here under the heat.
We're
He
enjoying
will do the similar with the Speaker of the House as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Immediately following the throne speech, I want to let you know that copies will be available. We just talked about the Lister family.
And
Copies will be available online at gov.bm immediately following the reading of the speech from the throne.
just as a little background history, Tina, I did a little bit of digging. Do you know that in October 1984, the speech from the throne was delivered by Princess Margaret? That happened because Bermuda was marking the 375th anniversary of the arrival of the first inhabitants. And her actual words were, Your Excellency, Mr. President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, I have it in command from the Queen to open this session of Parliament of Bermuda, the most ancient parliament in Her Majesty's overseas territories. And it is a pleasure for me to do so in the 375th year of the arrival of the first inhabitants. Of course, she was referring to those people who came on the Sea Venture in 1609, who really didn't have a choice. They were shipwrecked.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, that was a commemoration of the 375 years of inhabitants.
And of course, last year we had the acting governor, Jenny Fearson, of course,
Yes,
gave the speech from the throne.
that's right.
And that was
that's
the
right.
first time that we had a woman in the
Yes.
position of acting governor. And that was a first for us as well last year. Okay. Guests will be invited to stand when the governor is escorted to the throne. He will be escorted by, as we said, the acting ADC. His Excellency, the governor, will ascend the throne steps, bow first to the President of the Senate, and then bow to his right and left, acknowledging the seats that will shortly be occupied by the Honorable Premier and Speaker of the House. When the Premier arrives, he will approach His Excellency, bow, and pass two signed copies of the speech to be delivered. The Premier will bow again and take his seat. The governor will hand one of his signed copies to his aide-de-camp, sit and read from the throne. And then, of course, he will sign the copies and give them to the aide-de-camp at the completion of the reading of the speech from the throne.
Some people may not know, Tina, that our Senate is made up of 11 senators. 5 senators are appointed by the governor, acting in accordance with the advice from the Premier. 3 are appointed by the governor in accordance with the advice of the opposition leader, and 3 are appointed by the governor acting in his own discretion. And the House of Assembly is made up of 36 elected members of Parliament. The Speaker of the House mirrors the President of the Senate in position and skills.
As we await the arrival of the members of Parliament, the Sergeant at Arms, the Clerk to the Legislature, and the Speaker of the House. And as we said, all being well, there being no constitutional crisis, they should be making their way down shortly.
Very, very. Now our house, the Sessions House, located in Hamilton as of 1817. Previously, it was located in St. George's,
Right.
where the first Parliament convened in St. Peter's Church.
Right. That's part of the test for
That's
later.
part of the test,
For
yes.
later.
And here they come, Tina.
Not yet. I don't
Not
think
yet.
so. I think they're still.
You know,
I think they could still be debating.
they
up
could
there.
still be debated. That young man looked like his brother, who's
Yes.
hence my mistake. Pardon me.
The Sessions House, located in Hamilton, construction began in 1817, shortly after Bermuda's capital was transferred to St. George's to Hamilton.
From St. George's. Then.
From St. George's, that's right, to Hamilton. It's a two-story building of Georgian design. The upper story with the chamber and anterooms are set apart for use for the House of Assembly. The rooms on the lower floor are allocated for the Supreme Court. This arrangement continues today. Many additions have been made, of course, to the original structure, including the atrium.
That's right, that
the
was just
Instituto atrium as well.
And the clock tower was added in 1887 to commemorate the Jubilee of Queen Victoria's reign. At that time, the veranda and the southwest tower were also added.
And as we said, we will await the convener. Okay? I understand that they've just elected the deputy speaker, and they're just finished swearing in the MPs. So they are moving along in the House and should be here shortly. So the deputy speaker has just been sworn in. I did believe I heard this morning that there will be some members of the opposition that will be absent. I think there was a news story I heard this morning.
Oh, really?
Saying that several members of the opposition are traveling. So
Yes, yes.
we'll have to figure it out.
We'll have to ask the girls about. We will. We will. August and early September being travel vacation times for many people.
Yeah, so. But we are delighted, those of you that this is your first, we are delighted to have you here on this occasion of the convening of the legislature, convening of Parliament, the legislature. We are also delighted to have any visitors as well. Not as many visitors this time around.
Right.
And we're missing our school children.
I
School
know.
children.
Normally they're all
They're
over
lined
that
up.
lawn.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, we're back here on Cabinet grounds. If you recall last year,
Yeah.
we were on the lower level behind the House of Assembly in what is a parking spot.
Right.
Because there was construction going on in
Right.
the Cabinet building. So we're back here.
Yep. The Cabinet building, of course, opened in mid-July, and we're delighted to be back on the lawn, much well-suited
Well suited for the occasion, indeed. And I'm sure our guests are pleased to be covered by this beautiful tent.
Okay.
So, Tina, is there any other late-breaking news that we can share?
The only late-breaking news, of course, would be to see the Speaker of the House.
Yes.
And then confirm the elected deputy as well. And then, of course, that pretty much will be it. I think at this point, now that we know that Senator Joan Dillis Wright is the president, and Senator Jardine is the vice president. It would be just the confirming of who we suspect is the speaker, which is Dennis Lister, and of course Derek Burgess.
As the deputy.
And Dennis Lister is the longest serving
He is.
parliamentarian
He is.
and member of House of Parliament. So I think it's quite an honor for him to be able to take on the role of speaker.
Yes, it is. It is. And I'm sure he'll do it well. As you said, given his time in the House of Assembly serving, and he served previously as ministers in a number of portfolios.
Yes.
So his experience as an MP, as a minister, he would understand fully the proceedings of the House.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time for Speaker
Yes, indeed.
Speaker-elect.
Speaker-elect.
And of course, the same goes for Derek Burgess, who's served many years in the House of Assembly. Is well suited. I've heard him when we listen to the House some nights.
Yes,
If he's
yes.
if he's been they've been in committee or so forth. Yeah. So I think both of them
Bring a wealth of experience. They certainly do.
We shall see once they're down.
Well, it's a gorgeous, beautiful day.
It is.
Now, in October of 1970, did I share with you that the convening of Parliament took place in St. Peter's Church? The reason was because it was the 350th anniversary of the first convening of Parliament by Governor Nathaniel Butler. And on that occasion, the speech from the throne was delivered by Prince Charles. So we've had a few occasions when members of the royal family have actually been in Bermuda and have read and delivered the speech from the throne on significant occasions and anniversaries.
Okay. So we got some interesting tidbits. Let me just get it here. From what's going on up the hill.
Oh, let's hear that.
Let's see. Okay, interesting tidbit number one. Chris Famous is wearing his Barkley tie.
Excellent.
Well, he should.
Well, he should.
He
Barkley is
should.
just celebrating its anniversary.
It's all the Barkley
All the
yes, yes. 120 years
Excellent.
of that institution.
And what's that rest?
And the other one is Dennis Lister III nominated his father for Speaker.
Oh,
that's
that's
an odd
lovely.
moment.
That's an odd moment. It is. It is indeed.
All right. They tell me they're arriving. They're getting ready to cross the street.
Okay.
So we will have the arrival of the members of Parliament pretty soon. But yes, that was a lovely tribute to the Barkley Institute
Indeed.
in the Royal Gazette yesterday.
What about the governor?
We'll have arrival of His Excellency the Governor, the Speaker, the Senate Speaker. I hope it's not the youth club. So they can use. And we have the arrival, of course, of the newly elected Senate President, along with the acting commanding officer of the Bermuda Regiment. His Excellency, the Governor John Rankin, accompanied by the acting ADC, Captain Duncan Saunders. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand. Remain standing until the Governor has ascended the throne. Be seated. You may be seated.
Tina?
All right, as you can hear,
Black
we have
Rod
the
is approaching.
arrival of the members of the House of Assembly. We have the arrival of the Black Rod, Acting Chief Inspector Mark Clark, the Sergeant of Arms bearing the mace, Sergeant Major Arnold Allen, E.M.
The Clerk to the Legislature, Mrs. Shernette Wolf.
And we have the Speaker of the House, the Honorable Dennis P. Lister, the second, JP, MP.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have Bermuda's youngest Premier, the Honorable E. David Burt, JP, MP.
Premier of Bermuda and
Minister of Finance.
The Opposition Leader, the Honorable Patricia J. Gordon Pamplin, JP, MP. And in his new role as Deputy Speaker, the Honorable Derek V. Burgess, JP, MP.
We have the Government Whip, the Honorable Michael Weeks, JP, MP.
The government ministers are as follows. The Honorable H. Walter Raban, JPMP, Deputy Premier and Minister of Transportation and Regulatory Affairs.
He is followed by the Honorable Jamal S. Simmons, JPMP, Minister of Economic Development and Tourism.
Followed by the Honorable Kim N. Wilson, JPMP, Minister of Health.
And she is followed by the Honorable Walton D. Brown, JPMP, Minister of Home Affairs.
And the Minister of Public Works, Lieutenant Colonel, the Honorable David A. Birch, OBEED, JPMP. The Minister of Education and Workforce Development, the Honorable Diallo V.S. Rabane, JPMP.
The Minister of Social Development and Sports, the Honorable Zane J.S. De Silva, JPMP.
And the Honorable Levita F. Fogo, JPMP, Minister for the Cabinet Office with the responsibility for government reform.
She is followed by Minister of National Security, the Honorable Wayne M. Keynes, JPMP. He is escorting some
Youth parliamentarians. Following the minister is youth parliamentarians Teray Toll from the Barclay Institute and Shaziah Brown from Bermuda Institute.
lovely.
Youth parliamentarians.
Youth parliament. We have, ladies and gentlemen, the other government members of Parliament. They are not in any particular order, but first we have Ms. Tanae Furbert, JPMP, and she is the junior minister responsible for disability affairs.
The Honorable Wayne L. Furbert, JPMP.
Followed by Mr. Rolf P. Commission, JPMP.
The Honorable Michael Scott, JPMP.
Mr. Lawrence Scott, JPMP.
Mr. Neville Tyrrell, JPMP.
Mrs. Renee Ming, JPMP.
Mr. Kim Swan, JPMP.
Mr. Dennis Lister III, JPMP.
Mr. Chris Famous, JPMP.
with his marquee tie.
Aye.
Mr. Scott Simmons, JPMP.
Opposition parliamentarians, the Deputy Opposition Leader and Shadow Minister of Planning and Environment, Mr. Sylvan D. Richards, Jr., JPMP.
Ms. Susan Jackson, JPMP, Opposition Whip and Shadow Minister of Health and Seniors.
The Honorable Dr. E.G. Grant Gibbons, JP, Shadow Minister of Economic Development. Mr. Jeffrey C. Barron, JP, MP, Shadow Minister of National Security.
Mr. Cole H. Simons, JP, MP, Shadow Minister of Education.
Ms. Leah K. Scott, JP, MP, Shadow Minister of Tourism and Transport. And finally, Mr. Ben Smith, JP, MP, Shadow Minister of Sport and Youth Development. Please remain standing as Reverend Jermaine Tucker will recite the prayers. You can be seated once the prayers are finished and the governor starts the speech from the throne.
O God, loving creator of all heavens and universe, we give you praise for your sovereign divinity and our challenged humanity. On this occasion of almost 400 years of convenings of Parliament, it is right and indeed our privilege to confess our sins of thought, word, and deed, because righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. With deep humility and clarity of intent, I ask your gift of forgiveness that we may be reconciled to you and one another.
So hard. I ain't doing underneath.
Lord, to this day, a calm and tranquil Bermuda, and place before you the frail genius of our scattered thoughts, thoughts of raging storms and many natural and unnatural disasters, thoughts of brothers and sisters, even our own beloved, threatened and suffering diverse calamities in many parts of the world, thoughts of government, civil, and faith leaders struggling, sometimes responsibly and other times irresponsibly, with daily matters that change the soul and destabilize the security of communities and nations. Thoughts of political discourse where Charles Spurgeon said, a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. Thoughts of singing redemption songs with a passion as Robert Nesta Marley, who in his weakness was made strong by the hand of the Almighty, to reimagine an eternal consciousness as a counterpoint to the isms of his day and ours. Thoughts of prophetic resonance in still waters which creep upon us like the whispers of Melody Messere Van Putten's poetic summation. God is the light, and the light is all there is. And so, O Redeemer of humankind, on behalf of our Queen Elizabeth, John our Governor, David our Premier, Patricia our Leader of the Opposition, and all members of this legislature who swore an oath to serve in concert with each branch of government in the interest of all citizens and residents of Bermuda, and who now stand and knock by your mercy and grace at this door of revelatory opportunity, I gratefully call on you to inspire each of them by your Spirit, above everything else, to guard their hearts, because from it flow the springs of life. Finally, I pray this convening of Parliament may manifest your glory and prepare the way of your kingdom, through Jesus Christ, your Son and crowned Lord, who is alive and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Everyone should know by now, please. I need water.
Honourable members of the Senate, have you elected your President? Madam President, I most heartily approve of your election.
Until afterwards.
Okay. Until afterwards?
But I'm totally muted.
Yeah, yeah.
Members of the Honourable House of Assembly, have you elected your Speaker?
Oh my God.
Mr. Speaker, I most heartily approve of your election.
Your Excellency. Your Excellency, I thank you for your gracious approval. I must now, in the name of and on behalf of her next is faithful people of these Bermuda Islands, in order that they may be able to fully to discharge their duties in order and to right freedom of speech in their debate, that they may have full access to your Excellency, and that their proceedings may receive most favorable interpretation.
Madam Speaker and members of the Honourable House of Assembly, in Her Majesty's name, I do assure to Her Majesty's faithful Commons of the Bermudas the full enjoyment of their ancient rights and privileges, and that they may depend upon a favourable interpretation of their proceedings.
Your Excellency, on behalf of your Majesty's faithful people of these Bermuda Islands, I thank you for your service.
Thank you, Premier. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the historic general election of July 18th produced the clearest expression of the people's will that Bermuda has ever witnessed. At more than 46,000 voters, the voters' list was the largest in Bermuda's history. The Progressive Labour Party secured just under 60% of this enlarged popular vote, a clear endorsement of the government's election manifesto, which laid out plans to build a better and fairer Bermuda. The government has twice as many seats in the House as the opposition, and the government's backbench outnumbers Her Majesty's loyal opposition. These salient facts provide both the background and the mandate that drives the 2017 speech from the throne. This convening will see a new Parliament led by a new government committed to ensuring social mobility and removing social inequality. This government will face the issues of division in our country head on and will overcome them. For too long, Bermuda's economy, wealth and influence have not created a level playing field. When there have been economic downturns, one segment of Bermuda suffers far more than the other. And when economic bonuses, such as the richest sailing event in history, come to Bermuda, the same segment receives little benefit. Bermuda was listed as the most expensive country in which to live in 2016. Against that backdrop, Bermudian jobs continued to decline, while more non-Bermudians were added to the workforce. It is the duty of a responsible new government entering Parliament to prioritise reducing the cost of living, creating Bermudian jobs, and growing Bermuda's economy. The former government's use of the trickle-down theory of economics, the principle that the poor who must subsist on table scraps dropped by the rich can best be served by giving the rich bigger meals, has failed the people of Bermuda, as it has failed other citizens around the world. Instead of the uneven nature of trickle-down economics, this government believes in ripple effect economics. If one pictures a rock being thrown into a lake, you can see the ripple that spreads from that rock hitting the water. This is what this government will do in Bermuda: create ripples, not trickles. The government will ensure that Bermudians who are waiting for the crumbs to fall will now have a seat at the table to share the full meal. The government is cognizant of the fact that in recent years there have been multiple demonstrations, marches, and other forms of civil protest that clearly display the gulf of trust between legislators and those they serve. This government will repair the relationship between the government and the people by communicating more, serving more, and inspiring Bermudians to see the government as a partner in the improvement of their quality of life. In the weeks since the election, the government has been meeting with business leaders, union leaders, community leaders, civil servants, and Bermudians from every walk of life. This throne speech prioritizes the issues that will grow international business, inspire our children, protect and respect our seniors, restore confidence to public education, and ensure that Bermuda is best placed to meet the challenges of the modern information age. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the core of the government's philosophy is focused on growing the economy while empowering all Bermudians to become full participants in the economic miracle that is Bermuda. The government will ensure that Bermuda's success in attracting the most innovative companies from around the globe to Bermuda is increased, and that the quality of life for Bermudians is also enhanced by the presence of those companies. The plans laid out in this throne speech are specifically designed to achieve economic growth by creating new jobs for more people to work and live in Bermuda who complement, not overpower, Bermudians in the workforce. This will ensure growth in our international business sector while new impetus to grow our domestic economy is created. The government will continue to ensure that all measures are taken internationally to maintain Bermuda's leading role in the global insurance industry. Bermuda is facing a number of threats that, if successful, will cause our economy significant harm. The government is mindful of these threats and will act to ensure that Bermuda's interests are both promoted and protected overseas. Bermuda's proven track record for meeting these challenges can only be continued by keeping Bermuda's unique story and standards in the minds of regulators, politicians, and those who may seek to undermine our role in global finance. This government will increase Bermuda's outreach around the globe by staffing the empty Washington, D.C. office and increasing engagement with the European Union in Brussels to ensure that Bermuda's interests are represented as the United Kingdom leaves the European Union. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, and members of the House of Assembly, leaving Bermuda's economic and commercial development to the whims of the markets or external forces is unwise. Bermuda has existed without a national plan for too long. Bermuda needs to draw on the intellectual capital of our stakeholders to move our community in the same direction. The government will re-establish the Bermuda First think tank, consisting of local and international business and community leaders, to produce a long-term economic and social plan for Bermuda. With broad community support, this economic plan will produce balanced long-term economic growth that will create jobs in Bermuda. In 2015, the Caribbean Regional Technical Assistance Centre, CARTAC, completed a review of Bermuda's tax system. Many stakeholders requested access to this document, but the former government refused to share its contents. In keeping with its pledges of transparency, this government will table the CARTAC review in Parliament so that parliamentarians and members of the community can be made aware of the recommendations. With a world economy that is changing rapidly, Bermuda must examine its current system of taxation to ensure that it remains a competitive jurisdiction and protects against external threats. In order to determine and create the fairest tax regime possible, the government will create a tax reform commission, drawing participants from both political parties, international and local businesses, trade unions and the Bermuda Bar. The Commission will conduct a review of our system of taxation and revenue collection and make recommendations on tax reform to Parliament that enhance Bermuda's international competitiveness and increase tax compliance. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, Bermuda's economy is in desperate need of economic diversification as a means to provide additional jobs and careers for Bermudians. The government will ensure that Bermuda is poised to meet new demands and will be aggressive in reaching out to new global areas of growth. Therefore, the government will establish an economic diversification unit to make progress on this urgent need. This permanent organization will consist of a small number of persons with a proven history of developing economies. Their mission will be to identify new opportunities for economic diversification and to subject them to structured analysis and research. Once areas have been identified and agreed upon, the unit will seek partners and investment to develop new local industry. In the highly competitive world of global finance and financial services, innovation and reputation are almost equally valuable. At present, captive insurance jurisdictions, such as the Cayman Islands and Barbados, are using Bermuda's lack of incorporated segregated accounts companies, ISAC legislation, to win business. The government will draft, table and pass the legislation required to ensure that Bermuda's hard-won reputation for modernization is maintained. Madam Speaker and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, in 2000, the Hotel Concessions Act was passed to incentivize hotels to upgrade their facilities. Over the past 17 years, this landmark act has become outdated, and Bermuda must be more nimble in attracting tourism investment. This government will pass the Tourism Investment Act to stimulate investment in all aspects of our tourism product, including restaurants, attractions, and facilities to grow tourism and to create jobs. International events in Bermuda must deliver more than exposure to our island's beauty. They must deliver jobs and commercial opportunities for Bermudians, as well as a memorable experience for our visitors that will encourage them to return. The government will transform the ACBDA into the Bermuda Event Authority. This reform body will build on the experience of hosting the America's Cup. However, the new authority will be constituted to utilize a far more diverse and inclusive approach to finding, attracting, and managing events. Bermuda is more than golf, rugby, and sailing. And there exists a capacity to grow events to attract younger, more cosmopolitan, and more diverse visitors to our shores. With jobs for non-Bermudians continuing to grow as Bermudian jobs are lost in the tourism industry, it is clear that a new approach is needed. In this term, the government, working in tandem with the Department of Immigration, the Department of Workforce Development and stakeholders, will conduct an industry-wide skills and needs assessment to identify areas where unemployed or underemployed Bermudians can be trained to fill or be promoted into jobs currently held by non-Bermudians. To further facilitate the entrance and development of Bermudians into the industry, the government will seek to reform and revitalise the Bermuda Hospitality Institute, BHI, as a stronger, more effective vehicle for empowering our Bermudian people. The training and designations that the BHI offers will be enhanced to certify Bermudians so they can become stakeholders in the tourism industry. Vacation rentals are a growing and important part of Bermuda's tourism economy, and it is necessary for Bermuda to legislatively define vacation rental property to remove bureaucratic restrictions and develop a light-touch regulatory approach. Vacation rentals legislation will be enacted to enable the government to better support the vacation rental sector to the benefit of Bermudian homeowners, service providers and entrepreneurs. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, in Bermuda there are cooperative ways for people to save money, trade goods and services and engage in business. One such example of a cooperative entity is the BIU Credit Union. Cooperative economic empowerment has the ability to spread risk and benefit greater numbers of people than operating alone. To create and expand the opportunities to boost community-based economic empowerment, the government will create a Director of Cooperative Economics. Empowering small business is the key to economic growth. The Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, BDC, was established in 1980, and its remit has adapted over the years. The government will conduct a holistic review of the services offered by the BEDC to fully engage in the economic empowerment of Bermudians. Many entrepreneurs have commented that the BEDC needs to be more flexible to meet the needs of business. The government will ensure the BEDC is better able to serve their clients by increasing entrepreneurs' access to capital, leading to increased economic growth and jobs for Bermudians. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, in a country where providing employees with medical insurance is mandatory, where motor insurance is mandatory, where pensions are mandatory, and where more than half of Bermudian homeowners have a mortgage, the majority of residents are involuntary consumers of financial services. Limited lending options coupled with austerity in recent years have operated against the aspirations of many hard-working Bermudians. Therefore, during this session, this government will explore the best means by which to expand banking options available to Bermudians and increase the opportunities available to finance their legitimate aspirations in this society. Over the years, there have also been a number of complaints regarding the treatment of Bermudians by debt collection agencies, the majority concerning exorbitant interest rate charges and the sharing of information to employers and others. At present, if clients have complaints about mistreatment, they do not have representation beyond the expensive and time-consuming avenue of Bermuda's legal system. Therefore, the government will introduce regulations for debt collection agencies, regulate payday lenders who lend money at extraordinary interest rates, and bring banking, insurance, and other financial service conduct under the umbrella of an updated Consumer Protection Act. Given the growing gap between the two Bermudas, it is imperative that the government of the people addresses the cost of living that severely and detrimentally impacts quality of life. Food prices are too high in Bermuda, and the high cost is even more evident when one wants to feed their family healthier options. Bringing down the cost of food will require a collective effort and original thinking to be successful and sustainable. This government is committed to reducing the expense of Bermudians' grocery baskets. Accordingly, the government will grant the Price Control Commission additional powers and scope to find innovative ways to reduce the cost of living in Bermuda. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, to ensure that workers can live in dignity and are not working simply to remain in poverty, the government will support a new parliamentary committee to complete the work that was started in the last Parliament to examine the living wage. This committee will present Parliament with the recommendations for implementing a living wage in Bermuda. Immigration reform remains a key issue for our country, and this government is committed to a consultative process. There is wide agreement that the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Act 1956 needs a complete overhaul. During this year, the government will establish a bipartisan committee on immigration reform comprised of MPs from both political parties who will engage in a consultative process with all stakeholders to develop both policy and legislation. There are many challenges in the workplace which need to be addressed. Some are bad practices that need to be eliminated, but other issues are structural and lead to discrimination and resentment among workers. One such structural imbalance is the difference between pension benefits required for guest workers and those required for Bermudians. Currently, employers are not required by law to provide the same level of pension benefits to guest workers as they are to Bermudians, thus making it more expensive to employ Bermudians. In collaboration with employers and the Bermuda Trade Union Congress, this government will update pension legislation to require equal treatment for Bermudian and expatriate workers, while also updating labour legislation to ensure that labour disputes are handled more effectively and labour rights are protected. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, Bermuda is a blue-chip business jurisdiction and a world-class tourist destination. It is important, therefore, that our reputation as an innovative and competitive jurisdiction is complemented by being at the vanguard of an exploding digital economy that is creating groundbreaking technologies and new businesses almost weekly. To grow our economy, the government will issue a request for information to establish a technology hub at Southside. This will allow startups in the technology field that require little more than a computer and an internet connection to use our regulatory environment while developing their new products and services in Bermuda. The vision is to transform Southside into a technology-based community with living facilities as well as an active office community. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, and members of the House of Assembly, the government's plans will grow Bermuda's economy. However, outcomes in our public education system must be improved to equip the next generation of Bermudians to fill the jobs of the future. During the election campaign, the government made clear its intention to phase out middle schools and return to a two-tier system. The government has embarked upon a new strategic planning effort to transform the quality of education. This approach will create a vision for education that is developed by Bermudians for Bermudians. As the consultation process reaches its final stages, to ensure that all stakeholders have an opportunity to provide feedback, the Department of Education will host 3 town hall meetings in September. The Department of Education will use this feedback to finalise and move into the implementation design phase of the strategic plan. The new plan will be completed and in place by September 2018. In 2017, it is unfortunate that most Bermuda public schools do not have wireless internet. In the last 7 weeks, this government has moved aggressively to fulfil its 100-day pledge to commence installation of Wi-Fi in public schools. When students of East End Primary School and Purvis Primary School arrive at school next week, wireless internet will have been installed. The government will complete the installation of Wi-Fi in all primary and middle schools by the end of the school year. This implementation will be complemented by an IT strategy for public schools that includes teacher training. With the summer success of the Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts and Mathematics STEAM Academy, the government will concentrate on the development of STEAM in our primary schools. Therefore, the government will ensure that all primary schools have resources to integrate STEAM education in classrooms by September 2018 to provide students with equal access. STEAM education initiatives have yielded excellent results worldwide, and there is much evidence to suggest that engaging girls in STEAM at an early age can serve to close the gender gap in later years, especially in disciplines where girls have traditionally been sidelined. The government will ensure that lifelong learning and access to education and educational resources are available to Bermudians, to all Bermudians of all ages. In keeping with its commitment to hit the ground running, the government has already delivered one of its 100-day pledges by investing in Bermuda's future, by providing the opportunity for 150 Bermudians to further their education at the Bermuda College. The government will create a national workforce development plan in collaboration with our key stakeholders to ensure that Bermudians are properly prepared to take advantage of both current and future job opportunities. The plan will include a national skills policy for employers to address chronic skills shortages across different occupational groupings. The plan will also offer more training programs at the college to provide more opportunities for Bermudians to retool their skill sets. Additionally, the government will conduct a pilot program to assess the provision of childcare services to working parents to enable them to attend night courses at the Bermuda College. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, reforming and improving our public education system will yield better outcomes in the future. Poor educational attainment and lack of economic opportunities are the main contributing factors to antisocial behaviour and violence. The Bermuda Police Service has steadily sought to combine strong enforcement with best practice community policing. Police officers have been engaging in schools and in the communities they serve. Operational control of the police service will continue to be the purview of the Commissioner, but the time has come for a coordinated methodology by which strategic decisions can be made and clear input provided to the Commissioner regarding policing priorities. During this session, the Legislature will be invited to consider a bill to create a police authority which will comprise Government House, the government, the police and laymen working together to help establish Bermuda's policing priorities and determining the funding required to properly support our valued service. The Royal Bermuda Regiment will assume responsibility for inshore maritime patrolling from the Bermuda Police Service. During this session, relevant statutes will be amended to permit regiment soldiers to carry out some law enforcement functions in this maritime role. These changes augment the special constable training and designation earned by soldiers and will return police officers currently performing this function to core policing duties. The Government will amend the Defence Act 1965 in consultation with the Governor to officially end conscription to the Royal Bermuda Regiment within this legislative session. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, violence and antisocial behaviour will no longer be seen solely through a law enforcement prism. The solution to these issues rests in determined action to address the social and economic inequalities that have given rise to violence in Bermuda. The Government will appoint a gang violence reduction coordinator with a singular focus on implementing programs to reduce violence and antisocial behaviour. The coordinator will review the effectiveness of existing programs while ensuring that social services are focused on dealing with the root causes of crime. During this session, the Government will reduce violence through greater opportunity for those historically left out of the economic success of Bermuda. The Government will ensure that opportunities exist for young people who wish to leave a lifestyle that can only produce incarceration, pain or death, by supporting social enterprises that offer employment opportunities and skills development to Bermudians seeking to exit gangs. Additionally, the Government will provide financial support to Bermudians who wish to break from their dependence on gangs to return to school, to learn a trade, or achieve their GED. Madam President and members of the House of Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, mere steps from where we meet today, a scene of public turmoil played out which was more reminiscent of Bermuda's dark past than its professed 21st century ideals. An important show of democracy descended into open conflict between concerned citizens and those charged with protecting the very rights they sought to exercise. In the wake of the events of December 2nd, 2016, this Government has determined that a greater balance must be struck in favour of those who rightly question the actions of the police. Therefore, during this session, legislation will be introduced to give ordinary citizens greater confidence in the independence of the Police Complaints Authority. These amendments will enable truly independent investigations in the case of complaints regarding police conduct. The Government will also establish a parliamentary committee to look into the events of December 2nd to bring closure to this dark day in our country's history. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, in 2017, national security must also focus on cyber security and ensure that our digital infrastructure is protected and safe. Bermuda is heavily reliant on its digital infrastructure as it supports communication, commerce, government service, delivery and records, and it undergirds Bermuda's role in global finance. As the potential for cyber attacks to generate significant consequences to Bermuda's economy and society increases, Bermuda's cyber security is a national priority. A harmonised approach that ensures Bermuda prevents, is prepared for and recovers from cyber attacks is required. Accordingly, the Government will commence stakeholder consultations to develop a national cyber security strategy. Technology provides users access to a world of information. However, it also exposes them, particularly young people, to risks including cyberbullying, fraud and cyber stalking. It is important that responsible online safety practices are encouraged. The Government will host a youth-focused Stop Cyberbullying Summit that will initiate the creation of a national cyber safety plan. The summit will take place in December 2017 and jumpstart the creation of the plan in the first quarter of 2018. Madam President, and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, and members of the House of Assembly, the Government has outlined its plans to grow the economy, reform the education system, and address the national security challenges facing the country. Simultaneously, the Government will also make changes to legislation to improve the social conditions in the country. The Financial Assistance Programme that serves some of the most vulnerable in our society is in need of reform, as the current system does not effectively serve either the clients or the government. The government will undertake a review of the financial assistance programme. This review will require able-bodied, unemployed persons who are receiving assistance to upgrade their education and skills to facilitate their return to the workforce. Financial assistance should encourage people to find work. Therefore, people who take a part-time position will not find themselves penalised. The government will reform financial assistance to reduce abuse, discourage dependency, and ensure that work pays. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, and members of the House of Assembly, there are many parents who, either through circumstances or choices, are not living with their children and have been ordered through the courts to provide financial support. In some cases, the parent has abandoned all parental responsibility, and punishments that come from breaching an order are required. As of August 29, 2017, the arrears of child support payments in Bermuda stands at $46.7 million for 1,840 outstanding cases. Therefore, this government will ensure that full compliance by those who are ordered to pay child support but refuse to do so. However, there are some parents who, due to the economy, temporary employment or other factors, have built up arrears and may even have been incarcerated as a result, but are now trying to reduce their arrears and financially support their children. Accordingly, the government will undertake a thorough assessment of the child support system to analyse the deficiencies of its enforcement measures to create new enforcement options. Access to alternative dispute resolution will be simplified so that a resolution is more quickly achieved for the child's benefit. The overall goal is to improve enforcement measures to minimise delinquency. The government will amend the Children Act 1998 to achieve a greater degree of protection and care for children. In a great many cases involving care and custody disputes, parties each have litigators and advisors representing their interests, while the child often does not have the same. Accordingly, the Act will be amended to enhance the existing protocol that assigns a litigation guardian to children whose custody, care, or control is before the courts. The guardian will ensure the interests of the child are fairly represented in the courts and that any subsequent orders or findings are respected by all parties. In addition, the government will expand the duty to investigate under the Children Act 1998, giving the Director of Child and Family Services the ability to enter public or private schools rather than only the Department of Education. The Act will also be amended to indicate that case reporters are not required to receive consent from a parent or guardian to investigate, especially when the allegation involves a parent or guardian. When sex offenders have been tried and convicted, to help prevent the tragedy of sex crimes being repeated, the government will selectively release information pertaining to sex offenders to members of the public. Offenders and the disclosure of their information will be managed according to the risk they pose to the public. Since the election, the new government has created a protocol on disclosure of information identifying sex offenders, and this will be distributed among stakeholders to formalise a systematic approach to minimising the risks posed to the public by high-risk offenders. In many jurisdictions, the legal aid scheme is the only avenue for citizens to receive the legal representation they require. In Bermuda, the legal aid scheme is facilitated by the Legal Aid Act 1980 and is a pillar of Bermuda's justice system. During the upcoming legislative session, administrative and other improvements will be undertaken to reform the administration of the legal aid scheme. The goal is to increase the availability of legal assistance while minimising costs and enabling an accurate prediction of costs. The criminalisation of our citizens for minor, non-violent possession of cannabis is an open sore in our society, damaging the lives of hundreds of Bermudians, young and old. This is also an issue of fairness, as black people in our society are far more likely to be arrested, charged and convicted for cannabis possession than white people. Given the dire consequences of a conviction for simple non-violent drug possession, the government will decriminalise cannabis possession for amounts under 7 grams. Thank you. Despite the severity of Bermuda's penalties for illicit drug use, they apparently fail to deter criminal behaviour. Given that the behaviour is driven by addiction, punishments tend to be ineffective. Consequently, the government has a duty to seek ways to reduce drug abuse and increase rehabilitation. The government will publish a green paper for consultation to review Bermuda's drug policies to discuss options to reduce drug abuse. The menace of drunk driving on our roads is one that can be difficult to curtail, given the proliferation of alcohol versus our available enforcement resources. This government will not tolerate impaired driving. Sobriety checkpoints and increased penalties will be implemented to reduce the number of people who drink and drive. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the cost of health care is a major expense for the government and private employers, which reduces our global competitiveness. Cost reduction will lead to savings that will promote economic growth. The government will launch a comprehensive review of healthcare costs in Bermuda and will seek to extract savings through the entire healthcare system. The government will institute a regime that protects seniors and others in care homes by amending the Residential Care Homes and Nursing Homes Act 1999 to provide standards, sanctions and regulations that protect and respect our care home residents. The government will introduce the Radiation Therapy Act to provide coverage for the subscribers of the government's health insurance plan and future care patients to allow them to utilise local life-saving radiation treatments. This gap in treatment coverage must be addressed to ensure access to the latest on-island care. The community must take actions to reduce habits that lead to the high incidence of chronic disease in Bermuda. These chronic diseases, such as diabetes, heart disease and hypertension, have common preventative factors such as healthy eating, active living, maintaining a healthy weight, smoking cessation and consuming alcohol only in moderation. The government will engage all sectors of society in a coordinated strategic plan to halt the rise in obesity and diabetes in Bermuda. The government will lead the way in wellness by encouraging its employees to make healthy choices and will contribute to their well-being by offering programs, incentives and education to support the journey to a healthier public service. While unhealthy foods are often appealing due to their lower prices, the cost of treatment is significantly higher than the cost of prevention. Accordingly, the government will begin a consultation for the introduction of a sugar tax on the sale of certain foods and beverages in Bermuda. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, in keeping with its campaign promises, the government will implement a number of measures to improve the standard of governance in Bermuda to ensure that our democracy and our government is more responsive to the needs of the people it serves. The government will implement an interactive citizens forum to engage in constructive discussion on issues and to broaden the base of consultation on matters that affect Bermudians. To ensure Parliament remains relevant and responsive to the people, the government will implement 3 measures to enhance the standard of governance. First, the government will establish and implement a code of conduct for parliamentarians. The seat of democracy in Bermuda demands nothing less than full adherence to behaviour and standards that are becoming of the people's representatives. Second, the government will implement the SAGE Commission's recommendation to establish 3 parliamentary oversight committees to reduce waste, improve governance and increase efficiency. Third, the government will amend parliamentary rules to introduce Premier's question time, whereby members of the House of Assembly can question the Premier about government policies. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the power of government purchasing must be used to meet the objectives of the government as, for far too long, many small contractors have not had a fair shake. In keeping with its elective pledge, the government will implement the Code of Practice for Project Management and Procurement. The code has been drafted and in suspension since 2012, and over the last 5 years it has remained inoperative. This new government will implement this code before the end of October 2017. The government will enshrine rules that give preference in the awarding of contracts to companies that hire Bermudians. Additionally, the Office of Project Management and Procurement, in conjunction with the BEDC, will host workshops to ensure that more small contractors gain access to government work. Companies that hire Bermudians are to be supported, and this government will do so through a structured and transparent procurement process. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, to improve communications to residents, the government will produce a mobile application for government announcements and notices. Instead of paying high-priced IT consultants, the government will work in collaboration with the Bermuda College to have students build this app. This opportunity to engage in practical work will provide real-world experience to our students and will provide benefit to the college, as any application developed can be licensed to other governments worldwide. Technology is modernizing transportation globally, and Bermuda must examine those trends when taking into account the future of public, private, and public service transportation. Bermuda is also modernizing and is now home to 3-wheeled vehicles, 2-person rental cars, limousines, and water taxis. The government will conduct a thorough review of transportation and will produce a green paper on the future of transport in Bermuda that will provide various options for modernization, which also takes into account the needs of the differently abled. Residents who rely solely on public buses to get to and from work are severely impacted when a lack of available buses detrimentally affects the service, which in turn causes them to be late. The former government left 14 mechanic positions vacant, which caused the lack of sufficient buses to meet demand. In order to increase reliability of published routes, to instill confidence in the service, and to reduce the overtime paid to repair aging buses, the government will invest in new buses and will immediately fill 6 vacant maintenance positions. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, Bermuda lacks a system to register land title, and many Bermudian families have experienced avoidable disputes when title that was thought to be vested in one person is actually vested in another. Historically, some Bermudians have also endured lawyers and agents who were able to prey on the vulnerable and legally unaware. Although the Land Title Registry Act 2011 was enacted nearly 6 years ago, interested parties have stymied its implementation for their own motives. While it is not in operation, our current archaic, slow, cumbersome and inefficient system of deeds-based title transfer is still in effect. The government will bring the land title registration regime into force in order to minimize the chances of fraud, provide simple proof of ownership, and record the rights and interests in land on one register with all land information held in one place. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, former governments have provided financial guarantees for wealthy sports competitions and tax exemptions for restaurants, nightclubs and retailers. They have also provided loan guarantees for hotel construction and at-risk banks. One of the ways to better utilise the government's financial influence is to make an investment in our society by assisting community and sporting clubs to become self-sufficient. Accordingly, in exchange for creating sustainable and transparent financial controls, the government will provide loan guarantees to community and sporting clubs to upgrade their facilities, develop programs to serve our youth, spur entrepreneurship, and ensure greater community outreach in their parishes and neighbourhoods. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, currently Bermuda has a voluntary waste sorting policy, and the results have not reached the level of success originally intended. In order to inspire residents to further care for and protect Bermuda's delicate environment, the government will consult on the issue of mandatory recycling, single-use plastic bags and bottle deposits. Once the consultation is complete, the government will produce a green paper with options for implementation. Bermuda's planning laws and regulations are in place to ensure that Bermuda's environment and beauty are not spoiled by rampant development and construction. Accordingly, as certain determined property owners construct at will and will then apply for retroactive permission, legislation will be introduced to increase enforcement and introduce penalties for those who willfully violate planning policy and then seek retroactive approval. As a further commitment to ensure Bermuda's future generations can also enjoy our dwindling amount of unspoiled beauty, the government will identify the open spaces that must be protected for generations to come. Legislation will be introduced to take this protection beyond ministerial discretion. To stimulate construction demand and provide homeowners with additional income, the government will create a new category of dwelling units. These new one-bedroom or studio units will have assessment numbers, but will be restricted from having a private car registered at the address. Many homeowners have space to create an additional unit, but are unable to create additional parking spaces. This new type of unit can provide additional income for homeowners with smaller properties who previously were unable to create a rental unit. Bermuda's energy costs are among the highest in the world, and they stifle growth and economic advancement. The government must look to transition to energy independence and to reap the economic benefits of a clean energy future. The government has been presented with a number of proposals for the future of Bermuda's energy infrastructure. The government is in the process of reviewing the various proposals and will decide a path forward that ensures that Bermuda can realise the goal of reducing the cost of energy, which will reduce the cost of living and increase economic growth. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, on July 18, 2017, Bermuda voted for the new government's vision of a better and fairer Bermuda. They voted in record numbers to change the status quo, to ensure that hopelessness is replaced with opportunity, allowing all of Bermuda to share in the wealth and prosperity of our island home. Bermuda can do better. Bermuda can transform our education system to prepare the next generation of CEOs and tradesmen. Bermuda can diversify our economy to create new jobs and encourage economic growth. Bermuda can heal our social fabric to restore peace and rebuild our sense of community. However, Bermuda will only do better when all segments of our society work together to ensure that Bermuda becomes more fair, more just, and more equitable. former Premier Alex Scott said, Bermuda works best when it works together. This new government will lead that collective effort, bringing all stakeholders along in the spirit of collaboration to ensure that we grow the economic pie for all, that we increase opportunity for all, and that we build a better and fairer Bermuda for all. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, I am grateful for the convention which by tradition allows the Governor to add a few words of his or her own at the end of the throne speech. As a parent myself of 3 children, now all in their 20s, I welcome the initiatives in this speech aimed at supporting young people in Bermuda to fulfill their full potential. I also particularly welcome the initiatives which look to reduce the threats to the safety of all Bermudians from both violence and the all too many accidents on our roads. As we advance through peak hurricane season, I'm reminded of the great work that so many on this island, in Bermuda's emergency services and beyond, carry out in support of the Emergency Measures Organization in getting Bermuda back on its feet after a hurricane. Bermuda is not, of course, alone in its experience of hurricane response, and looking forward, there is perhaps more we can learn in this context from benchmarking our response against best practice and ensuring that we are not only well prepared for hurricanes, but for the many other types of natural or man-made disasters that could hit Bermuda without warning. As Governor, I will continue to do all I can to support the work of Bermuda's services in line with my responsibilities under the Constitution for security and compliance with international obligations, including in the areas of aviation and maritime security and respect for the human rights of all Bermudians. It has been my privilege to read the throne speech today, and I look forward to working with the government in delivering its priorities in line with my own responsibilities. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, I declare this session of the legislature open, and may God guide you and grant you wisdom in your deliberations.
The speech from the throne having now concluded, His Excellency the Governor will be retiring and traveling off in the landau. His Excellency, of course, has presented the signed copies of the speech from the throne to the Premier and to the Senate President. Members of the House of Assembly will now return to the House of Assembly to resume their business, and the members of the Senate will return to the Senate chamber to resume their business as well. It was a speech punctuated with lots of great applause and support as well. And His Excellency, of course, applauded the support that the speech for the throne discussed in terms of our youth and organizing and events, and that application was a great idea. The understanding so people can get notification of what's going on in government. Out legislation that will come forward. There's an update of pension legislation
Yes.
to require equal treatment for Bermudians and expatriate workers. Overall, lots of address about shortage of skills and making sure people that are skilled, also people on financial assistance, making sure that they are getting the additional education and needs. Lots of talk about Bermuda College, utilizing Bermuda College. Which is
And
right.
with regard to financial assistance, reviewing that program as well
Right.
to refine it, because there's a huge amount of money that goes to financial assistance. And so the governor, in reading this speech from the throne, pointed out the need to upgrade the skills of the able-bodied, unemployed person.
Right. And some of it, we heard some of it in the election platform.
Yes, we did.
And of course, it is still within the 100 days of the new government. So some of this we've heard, some of this, of course, some of the things are new, and we are looking forward to, it sounds like, a very active legislative agenda.
Certainly,
Yeah,
a very
so-
robust one.
Right,
In
yeah.
terms of improving and amending other legislation. For example, the Children Act of 1998
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the protection of children, and being able to go into both the private and public schools so that the children can be better protected.
The other thing was accountability.
Accountability.
I've heard that over and over, the accountability in regards to the members of parliament,
Yes.
the code of conduct, and
Yes.
so forth. But listen,
And
everyone's
the
getting
stage-
ready to go.
Oh, yes.
I want to thank you, Heather Whalen. It was great doing this again
It was
with you.
wonderful doing it with you. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Tina.
Those of you who have joined us, I hope that you've enjoyed the coverage. As you
Yes.
can see, people are leaving now.
Our premiers,
Members of
members of
Parliament
Parliament.
are heading back up to the House. Members of the Senate are heading to the Senate chamber.
Chambers.
We thank you again for joining us with our annual live coverage of the reconvening of Parliament on this gloriously hot September day.
Sunny day.
Thank you, CITV. Thank you, team. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Tina, for having us.
Time, we may never know. It should be noted also that the way people react to an invasive species infestation can often be more damaging than the infestation itself. And the rat plague in early Bermuda gives us a great example of that. So the governor was under intense pressure to do something about the rats, so he ordered some of the small offshore islands set on fire. So this would have not had much effect on the rats because they're such good swimmers, but it would have totally wiped out the indigenous vegetation and animals that were on those islands. And Governor Tucker had actually ordered the general burning of the main island of Bermuda because things had got so desperate. But thankfully the rats died out before he carried through on that. But the massive impact of invasive species on natural ecosystems is often irreversible. But often too, the impact of people trying to fix the problem is irreversible also.